Hi, good evening. Today we'll start a new ghazal. The first couplet is Bazi chaye atfal hai duniya mere aage. Bazicha, a game board, playground, plaything. Atfal, plural of tifl, which is child, so children. So it's the game board or the playground or the plaything of children. What है दुनिया मेरे आगे. Dunya as in the world, the universe. So in front of me, the world is just a game board or a plaything of children. होता है शब रोज. शब night or evening, रोज day. होता है शब रोज तमाशा मेरे आगे. So there's a spectacle that habitually happens in front of me night and day. For me, it's just a children, it's just a set of children playing whatever they're playing. Multiple meanings to this, as always. One of those meanings is that the poet has withdrawn from the telegrams and anger part of the world. That is, he's not involved into the petty little political plays of people, and also their worries about how to move up the social ladder, how to become richer, how to become more respected, etc. That I, the poet, don't care about it. I have either simplified my life enough that I don't bother about it, or I have understood enough. So that's one meaning. Another meaning is that the poet has negated himself to the extent that he has now unified with the universe, and anything that happens in the universe, in the world, in front of him, in his neighborhood, in the kingdom that he lives in the darbar of the king that he goes, that all that is really child's play. तमाशा हो रहा है, ठीक है, हम देख रहे हैं. As I hope that we will go to the other couplets also, and then you'll understand what he's trying to say. But let's just say how this relates to post-COVID life, to success in post-COVID life. So, success, especially in troubled times, depends upon our ability to understand reality and respond accordingly. Right? So, now, how do you understand reality? Very often you will find that I will use the word reality and truth as almost like synonyms. So, as I have already expressed my thoughts about this matter, there are, as I understand, 4 levels of reality. So, the real reality or the absolute truth is not knowable. It's an unknown unknown, or unknowable unknown. Actually, unknowable unknown. Why is it an unknowable unknown? You see, knowledge is a function of the mind. What is the mind? Mind is merely a tool which has evolved along with the changing circumstances that we as a species have faced. So, mind, brain, more properly the mind, is actually just a tool which helps us understand what life for us is, what reality for us is. It has really not much of a connection with what in reality there could be. In real reality there could be. It has some connection, of course, but it doesn't reflect the absolute truth directly. So let's go with things which we already understand a bit. So, for example, you and I understand what is green and how it is different from red. But how do we explain this to a person who's born blind? Or to a species? Suppose our dog can speak our language. Dogs do not have those cones within their eyes which will allow them to see green and red colors as we see them. Their world is more or less monochromatic, more or less black and white, as far as we know. So how do we explain what green is to them? What we know is that green and red are both very, very thin slivers of electromagnetic radiation on a rather extensive continuum of electromagnetic radiation. Now, all this is a story that we have made up. What in reality it is, we don't know. But this is how our mind allows us to understand this apparent reality, which is what Ghalib is telling us. That once you reach that stage of philosophical understanding of life, then you realize that what we understand to be true, what we understand to be real, is not actually real. So, I shared with you this thing about real reality. So, what is the real reality? Maybe it's not even electromagnetic continuum. Maybe we are all just brains in a vat. Maybe I am a brain in a vat and you don't exist. Maybe all of us are brains in a vat from your perspective and we don't really exist. Or maybe we are in, as it was shown in the movie Matrix. Or maybe we are just simulations being run on some grand computer from our perspective, but basically a handheld of some middle class student in some world somewhere else. Maybe we are just that simulation. And actually there is evidence which points towards the possibility that we are not real, but we are just simulations. Fundamentally, there is no way of knowing what is real reality. How do we know it? We can't know it. Our mind is not a tool sufficient enough to tell us that. So what are we like? We are essentially like flotsam on a sea, on the surface of a sea. We just go wherever we go and we think that that is the real reality. We are not connected down. There is no way we can be connected down. So what happens? As a result, we are dependent upon stories, different kind of stories, which we make for ourselves, which allow us to explain to us what reality is all about, right? And those we can understand only within the limitations of the mind, right? Even as a collective human mind, we are all extremely limited. And then to whatever extent one person can understand, that is only what can get inside that one person's brain, right? So real reality is unknowable. We can't know it. All we can know is how to survive and thrive. That's what this brain is primed for. So then what do we do? What do we have access to? What we have access to is different kind of stories. We can make different kind of stories and live by them. That's what we actually do. make different kind of stories and live by them. Now the closer they are to the actual reality, whatever that is, the absolute truth, whatever that is, the real reality, whatever that is, the more successful we are likely to be. So one layer above this unknowable, unknown, absolute truth, real reality is what I call objective truth. What is this objective truth? This is dependent upon another story that we have started believing in. That story is that everything can be understood only by logic and evidence, and that our senses or extensions of the same give us true enough evidence of reality. Now, this is what is the fundamental axiom of objective reality, of scientific reality, of philosophical reality. Everything is dependent upon logic and evidence, and the only evidence that is admissible in objective reality story is that which we get from our senses, from our touch and feel, from our eyesight, from our hearing, from our sense of smell, from our sense of taste. Now, we of course have developed many extensions to these. So for example, I see certain number of stars in the sky when I look up, but then I use an extension called telescope and I am able to see a lot more stars. Down here I can only see some little bits and pieces of things. I can't see smaller than that. And then there is an extension of our eyesight, which is a microscope, and we put that and we are able to see a lot more things, a lot smaller things. Similarly, we have X-ray, and that can see inside our body. We have MRI, we have so on and so forth. Similarly, our legs can only take us that far. We can only go so far and touch only so many things. But then what we have done is that we have made vehicles which go into the space far out, and they're able to land on different entities in the space, and they're able to touch them and take pictures of those and do experiments on those and tell us what they possibly are. So these are the extensions which have allowed us to go much farther. Similarly, when we are trying to understand something, very often we need to make a generalized picture of those things in our mind in terms of patterns, and to understand those patterns better, we have developed an advanced mathematics and calculus. And so if we are unable to do all that in our own heads and with our own hands, we have developed so many tools, including computers, one of which is allowing you to see me while I am distant in time and in space from you. So that's an extension of your senses, that you are able to hear and see what I'm saying. So that's the objective reality. So it's one level shallower than the absolute reality, which we cannot reach or touch or understand in any way, but objective reality we can. And then so that again is really dependent upon a story, dependent upon a certain set of assumptions which we have taken to be self-evidently true. Now, it is not really self-evidently true that our senses are telling us the truth. It is not, because we might be a simulation, we might be a brain in a vat, we might be in a matrix. But then we have assumed, because we have nothing better to assume, we have assumed that this sense of touch is real, this sense of sight is real, and this is giving us real picture. If this shows us earth is round, then indeed the earth is round. So that is how we tend to develop stories and live by them. You want to understand more about this thing, not in these specific terms, and not an epistemological discussion which we are having now, as in the discussion about what is knowledge. That is what we are having right now. What is true knowledge? So not in just so many words from that angle, but you can understand the importance of stories in our lives and culture and evolution when you if you go and read or listen to Yuval Noah Harari. He's a professor in Israel, a great guy, absolutely great guy. If there's one guy's stuff you should read and listen to, that's him. Do that. Great guy. So that's the one level shallower reality, and with that we have built up so many things. This very mobile phone that I am recording on, this is a function, this is a result of that particular story. And then let's go one level shallower, and that level itself has got two different levels. So that level is really subjective reality, subjective truth. Now subjective truth exists at the level of individuals as well as at the level of groups. So at the level of individuals, now there are so many things that I might believe about myself. The fact that I do believe that somebody is bothered about listening to what I have to say is itself a kind of a story that I have told myself, which is allowing me to be gainfully employed at this point in time. Not gainfully as in terms of money, but gainfully as in terms of being able to keep myself sane. If I were to really understand the bitter and the better truth that nobody really gives a fuck about what I have to say, then I'll really have nothing else to do, nothing much to do. Unless, I sort of go back into the workforce and do something economically useful, and then because some other people will also make some money or will be able to advance their position in the society or some shit like that, they might get involved with me. Or they might want to listen to me at that point in time. But right now, very, very few people, if at all any, would be interested in listening to what I have to say. But I like to believe that there is some value to what I'm saying. That is a subjective truth. Now, many the founders of religions and many religious reformers actually start from the same point. Buddha's 5 companions who became his first 5 disciples, they actually left him when he came back with his message after the enlightenment. They said this guy is not good enough, but then he persisted and he kept explaining, and today quite clearly Buddha is probably one of the most ancient, one of the most sensible religious messengers of antiquity, or even today. I mean, look at any guru and look at any Maulana and look at any other person involved in any religious activity. You will find that Buddha's message is the closest to objective reality than anyone else's, even today. Even 2000, 2500, whatever number of years after he first brought to us his message. Now you look at any religion. I'm wearing a cap, so let me talk about the Islamic truth, as it were. So now from individual subjective truth we are moving to group subjective truth. Now in the group subjective truth, what happens is that, say for example, Muslims, they believe in a certain story. Again, it's a story. Everything is a story. Even like I said, science is a story. So every religion obviously is a story. So what is that Islamic story dependent upon? La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. More actually, Muhammadur Rasulullah. That Muhammad is the messenger of God. So once you accept that statement that Muhammad is the messenger of God, then you have to listen to what he says. And then the first part comes that only his God is the only God, Allah is the only God, etc. And then a lot of people start believing in that, and that becomes their group reality. And sometimes it can be a little bit useful to people in keeping their sanity. It is also good in that it gives people rituals, something to do in times when they have nothing else to do, or they keep busy in those rituals rather than sit and worry about what is the real reality and lose their minds over it. So there is some use to religious stories as well. So the group subjective story is, for example, Islam, is for example Hinduism, is for example Marxism, is for example free marketism, is for example the importance that we give to today's sense of economy. So all these are group things, all these are group subjective truths. So individual subjective truths, group subjective truths, objective truth, and then the absolute truth, which we have no clue of. So these are all stories. Even what I am talking about, the absolute truth, is also a story. So बाजी चाहे अतफाल है दुनिया मेरे आगे, होता है शबो रोज तमाशा मेरे आगे. Bye bye.